Harvard biologist Edward O. Wilson is one of the nation's most important and famous scientists. His studies on human nature and ants have earned him 2 Pulitzer Prizes. He helped pioneer the fields of biodiversity and sociobiology. He is widely regarded for his breadth of knowledge and boldness of inquiry. His latest book, Consilience, calls for the fundamental unity of all knowledge. I am very pleased to have him back on this program. Welcome back.
Thank you so much.
It's good to have you here. I want to start with this, and we're going to work around some very interesting ideas. Quote, the major unsolved problem now is how the 100 billion nerve cells of the brain work together to create consciousness.
Correct. That is the major unsolved problem of the natural sciences. Okay. And as we approach some kind of a solution to that major problem, then we approach the articulation and possibly the solution to what I call the major unsolved problem of the social sciences, which is the linkage between mind and culture, and also between genetic evolution, which we know has an effect on culture, and cultural evolution, which has served as a milieu in which the genetic evolution of the brain and the mind has occurred over the past few 100,000 years.
You want to make what point about the mind and consciousness?
The point I want to make...
Fundamental to what's going on.
Yes, exactly. And then we can come to a definition of the word consilience.
Right.
The fundamental point is that the natural sciences have now expanded and grown rich enough so as to enter what I like to call the borderland areas between the natural sciences, particularly the biological sciences, and the social sciences, while some of the social sciences, like cognitive psychology and biological anthropology, have entered from their side, and we are now approaching what appears to be a remarkable bridging effort within the broad domain that up till now has separated the natural sciences from the social sciences and the humanities.
Let me go down this track, because I'm going to try to be, my curiosity helpful will be where the audience is. Some would like to think that the mind and consciousness is something out there that we don't quite know. You believe it is all about understanding how the physical science of the brain works. If we get that and understand molecular biology and understand cells, we'll understand what the mind is.
I believe that, and more importantly, so do the great majority of neurobiologists who work on the physical basis of mind. They believe that in a fairly short period of time, we will have learned enough about the way the brain is put together. We already know a great deal, but how it's put together, but also through 2 new techniques in brain imaging, just what the physical processes that constitute consciousness is.
So that if we begin to understand that, which is the big question for all of us,
yes,
we'll understand what made Michelangelo a genius?
I'm not sure whether we can do that in any foreseeable future. That is, define...
But that's where we're going.
Well, I think we are in time, because I don't see creative genius as something that is truly transcendent, but rather is the extreme expression of gifts and creative processes within all of us. But when we come
by genes.
Yes, well, ultimately, yes. I don't think that we'll come to understand Michelangelo any sooner than we will understand the origin of the magnificence, shall we say, of a tropical rainforest. But we're headed in that direction.
But it is explainable down the road as far as you're concerned as a scientist.
That is the basic proposition of consilience. And I might add, it's not just my idiosyncratic view. Consilience, incidentally, that's a word that goes back 160 years in the philosophy and history of science, and now I'm trying to pull it out into the mainstream because it's a pretty word, is it not?
Yeah, it sounds nice.
And also it has retained its exact meaning, which means the interlocking of cause and effect explanations across different disciplines.
Does it mean also the unity of all knowledge?
It was eventually the proposition that I'm making, the so-called consilience program or proposition or metaphysics, however you wish to express it, suggests that, yes, that would be the case, uniting at a fundamental cause and effect, material basis, all of the branches of learning.
So from what you've written about sociobiology and what you've written about biodiversity, how did you come to this?
Well, I was poised throughout as an evolutionary biologist. That is, a biologist who is mainly concerned with the processes and the products of organic evolution. And because my work throughout my career has dealt with social animals, hence a book I wrote 23 years ago called Sociobiology, right, I naturally had my mind focused at times on human social behavior. And so it has always been a dream of mine that somehow the same explanations fundamentally secured by the biological science of the origin of animal societies up to and including, say, chimpanzee social science would find relevance in the understanding of human behavior. I think that's a view that now has gained a great deal of credence.
And what do you worry about? Some would argue that you worry that there's huge danger if the social sciences are not speaking to the physical sciences, if they're going off in separate directions, because it's only by coming together.
Yeah, that's primarily my argument, and it's a large part of the practical argument. When you look at the social sciences today, they have a lot of strengths, and they've achieved a great deal, and they include in their services some of the brightest people in the country.
What have they achieved, for example?
Well, they haven't achieved nearly as much as they should have. I should say their track record for all of the faith and all of the funding we've put into them has not been impressive. That's partly due to the enormous complexity of the subject, its historicity, for example, but it's also due fundamentally to the fact that they do not have a theory. In order to have a theory, the way biology has a theory, chemistry, physics have a theory, you have to have a foundation. And that foundation has to be consilient exploration of the next levels of organization below that level of complexity that you're studying. If you're studying culture and society, human society, then you must understand mind. And they haven't done very well at adopting even what we know about mind. And in order to understand the human mind, which in aggregate produces culture, you need to understand the biology of the brain. They haven't done that.
Do they recognize the importance of it?
They're beginning to. I've taken particular aim, friendly, congenial, collegial aim at at economics. I've picked out what is generally the strongest and most prestigious of the social sciences to analyze this problem and point out that the difficulty, a key difficulty with economics, is that it doesn't have a foundation. When it talks about motives in microeconomics, you know, what makes people buy things or make certain choices that affect the economy. Generally, they deal with what we call folk psychology. There's the intuition of the economist, not with what we actually know from the science of cognitive psychology, much less biology of how the brain works. That's got to change.
What do they give to each other in terms of, on the one hand, social sciences, and on the other hand, the physical sciences? Because there must be something that you scientists can get from philosophers, historians, political scientists, and the like.
Well, from we can
poets,
get all
for example,
kinds of things that we can get from one another.
What do you get from a poet?
As I've said, what we get from we can get from poetry. The science is badly needed is, in fact, the poetry, the spiritual charge of the beauty of a creative act, which scientists engage in a way that's quite parallel to what carries along the poet themselves. But note, even if you look at this from a point of view, operationally, of a natural scientist looking for new things to discover, and believe me, that's the profession of natural scientists, to discover. You discover, if you discover, then you're a success. If you don't discover something, it doesn't matter how much you know, how wise you are not a success as a natural scientist. So natural scientists look for new problems, and what the social sciences and the humanities offer in vast wealth to us natural scientists now are problems to solve. It's in this broad area, still largely unexplored, between biology of the mind and the social sciences.
Social sciences offers to the pure sciences, some would say, or physical sciences, natural sciences, problems to solve.
Precisely. And new areas to open up.
And they offer to you poetry, passion.
They offer to us those problem areas. We offer to them,
you offer to them
a foundation. That is, foundational disciplines to connect up with. It doesn't mean that it's proposed that the social sciences and humanities are going to be reduced to anything. They'll grow richer. It's just that they will have more of a full material, Consilience explanation with all of the information and knowledge that has come from the natural sciences.
You once said an ideal scientist, I reminded you of this earlier, an ideal scientist thinks like a poet, works like a bookkeeper, little notes, little notes, little notes. Every little detail written down.
Right.
And if gifted with a full quiver, writes like a journalist.
That's right.
Tell me how a scientist should think like a poet.
Many people think that scientists proceed by some kind of ironclad, literal system of logic, looking at masses of data and then deciding that there's some kind of relationship or law there that they must puzzle out, like working a Sunday crossword puzzle. That isn't the way science works at all. The greatest scientists, Einstein's example, Newton, another, take great leaps of the imagination. They have a certain body of information, often sparse in nature at the beginning, and they envision from that bit of information what might be going on in the world of a very general sort, and then they think through what the process might be more explicitly, and then they define the bodies of empirical information that need to be uncovered and verified in order to test, that is, verify or discard that body of theory.
Do you feel that science has gotten the appropriate respect, or every bit that it should have?
Yes.
Okay.
I think scientists, the natural sciences are much respected in most of Western societies.
Do you as an individual need just based on what you just said about leaping forward, Galileo and others, you need a sense of science's order, that the notion, there's an interesting quote you once made about order and chaos, need the sort of structure that science gives you?
Well, I believe that intellectually people hunger for that structure and order. And I believe further that the spectacular success, I hope I'm not over-promoting my branch of learning, but the spectacular success of the natural sciences indicates that the most productive way of looking at the world, and I believe that goes on up even to the theory of the social sciences and the humanities, is through the scientific method.
The Atlantic Monthly has run April and March. E.O. Wilson, Back from Chaos. Enlightenment thinkers knew a lot about everything. Today's specialists know a lot about a little, and postmodernists doubt that we can know anything at all. That's one point you disagree with.
Certainly.
Great force. Jacques Derrida and the rest of them take that from you.
Yes.
One of the century's most important scientists, you, argues against fashion, that we can know what we need to know and that we will discover underlying all forms of knowledge, of fundamental unity. Here is the April 1998 Atlantic Monthly, the biological basis of morality. Morality has a biological basis.
Why not? I think that the evidence is increasingly strong that it is a production, the moral forms of moral reasoning that we have and the ethical precepts of the human mind.
From biology?
Certainly. Let's make a fundamental distinction that the philosophers have not laid before us adequately and made clear, that there are two possibilities, two ways of thinking. The transcendental, which is that moral precepts exist outside the human species and are there like mathematical laws of physics for us to discuss, or are the word of God for us to discover through Scripture and Revelation. That's one worldview, one way of looking at it. And the other is the empiricist view that we have evolved the ethical precepts that we have as a means, a necessary means of survival, that we enter into contracts and consensual agreements that are strengthened by making them into law and sacred oath. So there are the two competing systems of thought.
And they're incompatible.
They are fundamentally incompatible, and we might as well just put that on the table, lay the cards face up, and renew the discussion about morality and religion on that basis.
You say they're incompatible, but you also say, with respect to religion, it is, I think, you tell me what you say.
Well, you were about to introduce something, a very important disclaimer.
Okay, go ahead.
That will rescue me from serious trouble.
Okay.
But it is given, I think, from the heart as well as from the mind, that the empiricist, the humanist, must recognize that having evolved, our sense of morality, our sense of religion, is one of the deepest embedded in our genes, in the sense that we are extremely prone to develop religious belief and moral forms of moral reasoning just to survive, that have become extremely deep in our psyche. And to dismiss that then as so much mythology that we can be trained out of is a serious mistake.
What do you want one to come away with from this book?
I want to come away with having shifted, if I'm able, or helped to shift the entire frame of discourse about human nature and the human condition. And there are a lot of reasons why I'd like to see that happen. The opportunities for future research and understanding from both sides of the culture line that has separated the natural sciences and social sciences, humanities, and one thing, to explore and consider this proposition of consilient explanation, but in opening a new inquiry and general discussion about it, hopefully with mutual respect on all sides. I would like to see the liberal arts in colleges and universities revitalized. The liberal arts are in terrible condition and declining precisely, in my mind, because they're focused on the wrong frame of discourse. If they will focus on the relation of the great branches of learning in this manner, they will have a lot to talk about and a lot to learn quickly.
And the natural sciences will give them that in part.
Well, and furthermore, the humanities and the social sciences can be given to the natural sciences in a manner that will be exciting to them and complete their education. The natural sciences need it as much as the social sciences and humanities.
You have studied ants exhaustively.
That is one claim that I can make without embarrassment.
Yes, you can. Apart from this,
Yes.
and looking to the unity of knowledge, you know, what other kinds of inquiries are tantalizing to you that demand your attention?
I thought you would never ask. You know, one of the nice things about getting out to the border of our expanding knowledge, I just happen to be located there because I'm an evolutionary biologist, is to have a somewhat clearer view of what it is that we most need to know. And one area that I think is opening up for exploration, that's going to be a major area in the advance of science because it presents so many of the challenges that we value in the sciences and all scholarship, as a matter of fact, is the construction of ecosystems. We call it community ecology. It is how are whole ecosystems put together, you know, in the same way that organisms are put together. How are they created? How are they sustained? This is an area in its infancy and wide open for further exploration. How do the species, particularly, of the ecosystems, marsh, rainforest, desert, that represent the living community, that part of an ecosystem, how did they get there? Why do certain species live together and others are incompatible to create that ecosystem? What sustains it? And how is it evolving as a unit? We know extremely little about this still in biology. It's one of the most promising in terms of new discoveries, areas of biology ahead of us. and one that I happen to have a particular interest in.
This book is Consilience, The Unity of Knowledge. Edward O. Wilson, two-time Pulitzer Prize winner for his written books about his scientific inquiry. Much talk. He has been involved in some of the great debates having to do with science and nature and nurture and a lot of other issues. Now a call for more liberal arts education in our schools and a concern about sciences going off on their own and not benefiting from the natural exchange between all of them. I thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
We'll see you next time.